for some balance on your defensive pairs with maybe a little bit of size and some offensive
Yeah,
skill when it looks like the way they've shaken down this week?
yeah. Um, Josh and Tucker got together early in the year last year, and Josh had been coming off an injury, and Tucker, first year in the NHL. So we don't know that we really understand that pair yet because we had moved people around and got to different combinations. Just felt that Tucker's finish to his year, the back half of his year was really, really strong after he came back off injury. And that because he's such a big man and skates so well, he can keep pace with the bigger, faster guys that you see in the upper part of lineups. And then there's just, as you said, there's a bit of a complement with each pair that we have then in terms of size and in terms of speed and puck movement that we have people that can do that kind of off each line. So we're each pairing rather. So we like it. We'll move those around for sure as we go, but we want to take a look at this, get them some comfort together.
Go next to Paul Friesen from the Winnipeg Sun. Go ahead, Paul.
Paul, when you look at the way you've shuffled your top two lines, which one do you think opponents will see as your most dangerous going into the season? And is your goal to have kind of two very equal ones so that they can't just pick one to try to shut down?
Yeah, I think it'll be style-wise, right? They'll always look at Wheeler and Scheifele as big men that can skate. So you have to factor that with your D pairings, right? So you're going to need guys that can skate against Scheif's line. Where Paul and God, Patty's looked fast, right? He's a big man that's moving. So there's speed there with KC, but I think they will. I think they're going to look at the firepower on both lines as both something that they need to keep checking. And what they'll end up doing is matching with, maybe the speed pairing of their defense or lines will play against Scheif and then and match a different style possibly. But I would agree that I don't think it's as easy to sort out. And I think what you do sometimes when you play against teams that have two powerful offensive lines, you certainly go into the game with an idea, but then you've got to judge real quick which one's going, right? Because on every night there's usually one line that's got a little more jump than the other, and I think it'll be interesting to watch to see how that's matched. But I don't know from an offensive output that you can pick which one's going to score more goals yet.
We'll go next to Jason Bell from the Winnipeg Free Press. Go ahead, Jason.
Paul, you just you described why the Kyle Connor on a second line would never be seen as a demotion. But do you have to have a conversation with him, or do you have to sell him on why he's such a great fit for that second line?
I mean, you would if the personality dictated that you had to, but no, not with Kyle, right? He's never once, other than that, he said he really doesn't necessarily care who he plays with. It's not an issue for him. You look at the two guys, I'm just, I guess, kind of picturing that interview with Kyle. How do you feel about playing with those two? He's going to tell you, well, they're two phenomenal players. They're different than Scheif and Wheels, but I'm going to get my opportunities with either line. So I didn't have I told him what line he was going on. He said, hey, that's great. And that was it. And but part of that is my experience with Kyle Connor over the last few years. You didn't have to explain stuff to him. He just wants to go out and play and he'll figure it out.
Go next to Sarah Orlesky from TSN. Go ahead, Sarah.
Paul, just wanted to go back to your defensive pairings for a moment. When you said that you'll play around with them for a little bit, are you thinking still in camp that perhaps you'd like to look at some of the different pairings, or is that something more in the season?
Yeah, it's more in season, Sarah. Like we're pretty committed, and D pairings. I think there's more to D pairings getting kind of a comfort level with each other than there is forwards, and we've kind of had a bit of that rotation last year through injury. Because of the way camps are structured and we don't have a lot of exhibition games, I just wanted to get these guys together in their practice groups and kind of leave them.
And we'll go next to Kelly Moore from CJOB. Go ahead, Kelly.
Thanks. Paul, just as you look now into the final few days of training camp, I mean, we're still a week away from the game being played, but is the emphasis on 5-on-5 systems, or do you start to take a look at special teams? Like, does one take precedence over the other in terms of the focus for these next 5 or 6 days?
So we ran special teams prior to our scrimmage yesterday, and we will do that starting tomorrow. That will be in each one of our practices going forward. So yes, we've been more heavily weighted to 5-on-5 defensive, heavier drills early. And we're still going to do those next week, those heavy drills, but our duration of practice. So today at an hour 20, which is about 10 to 20 minutes shorter. So we'll start cutting back duration a little bit. And then we will add special teams in. There's not nearly as heavy a toll physically when you're running special teams. So that's kind of how we lighten up as we go. But starting tomorrow, there'll be a special teams component in each of our practices.
Go next to Ken Wiebe from Sportsnet. Go ahead, Ken.
Thanks, Paul. When it comes to Nikolaj Ehlers, he's always had great underlying numbers. Last year, you adopted the shooter's mentality. What other parts of his game allowed you to give him this opportunity on the top line to show what he can do with Blake and Mark?
Well, when you play on that line, you're going to draw an awful lot of firepower, so you can't just be good at one end of the rink. And Kyle Connor had kind of come in and was maybe a little ahead of Nikolaj in the defensive parts of his game. But we had always thought that Kyle, Mark, and Blake had, really fast, and they would work fantastically together, and they do, but you're almost overly weighted to speed on one line. And Nikolaj's made developments in his defensive game. He's just older, right? He's got more experience now. He understands how important it is in the defensive zone and what you do with the puck in the offensive zone and your risk profile against and who you're playing against. All those things that young players never think about before they get to the NHL, and they're all critical pieces, knowing who you're playing against, the deep you're playing against. So he's a more mature person, a more mature player. And I would say that his numbers would say that he's earned the right to play against the other team's best. And it's going to be a big challenge for him, right? This is another phase in Nikolaj's development.
And we'll go next to Jeff Hamilton from the Free Press. Go ahead, Jeff.
Paul, with your D pairings, it looks like I think you kind of alluded to it, but it looks like a bit more of a balanced approach. How much of that has to do with this season and the uniqueness of this season and the scheduling? Is it expecting to lean on the group more as a 6-man unit than maybe in the past?
It's a really kind of good question, but we've had, like, if you just go the last 3 years, you're talking about kind of 3 major different looks. Last year, Tucker's a rookie coming in, and Neil Pionk's really coming out of his first full year pro. And then, Lord, we had, Ville Heinola playing, and God, we had everybody playing defense last year. I think Charlie Huddy took a couple of shifts one night. So want to get a little bit of balance. I'm interested in where Tucker Pullman's at in his development might factor into the next, we've got a game card that's got a different set of D pairings on there that we might look at. But balance, I agree. You're not running defensemen into the 25, 27 minutes in our group this year. The schedule won't allow it. So we do have a bit more of a balance. We've got 2 kind of really, we think, special offensive lines. We need to put people behind them that can move the puck. So we've been able to do that by the way we've structured them.
We'll go next to Sarah Orleski from TSN. Go ahead, Sarah.
Sorry, Paul, more questions about your blue line. But when you look at the group this year, how do you want the identity of this group to maybe be a little bit different? Or in what way do you want it to be a little bit different than what we saw last season?
So if we're talking about just the group of that, I don't want it to be a whole lot different, because those guys played their butts off last year. They really, really did. I mean, they had to work hard and compete hard every single night to do the job. I'm mindful of what we give up in the high danger area. I think I would say we just put an awful lot more pressure on our forwards to help with that. When you look at it, when you add Stastny and you add Thompson in your own end, a lot of times you've added, you know, those are defensemen, right? They work low with those Ds. So we feel that we've gotten quite a bit better in the middle of the ice with those two men coming in from where we were last year. And that's going to be a great big help, right? You've added Forbert a while. So now you've also got development time on Pullman and development time on Pionk for that matter. So we feel that the mentality was right, the heart was right, the compete was right. We've have minor changes maybe in all of our systems this year, which is fairly normal. But we added two guys that play low that are going to be really, really good at it, and that's going to have a big impact for us.
Just a few more. We'll go next again to Jason Bell. Go ahead, Jason.
Hey, Paul, with the absence of Matthew Perreault, I mean, how much of a kink does that put into the auditions for a third line? Or has Mason kind of, you know, are you comfortable with where the Lowry trio is right now?
I am comfortable with where they're at. And in that game yesterday, those were all other options that I liked an awful lot. The Jansen's looks good. He looks strong. There's going to be some competition in that spot, right? As Vesalainen's had 4 really good days, right? He's changed his body composition. He's a year into, you know, real pro hockey, and now he's starting to look like a guy that's going to play in the National Hockey League. So there's some competition there for sure. I don't have that bottom 6 set other than I like my options with that. You know, the 2 lines that ran in that scrimmage yesterday were pretty darn good. You know, scored the goals, but battled and did all the things you would expect those kind of players to do. So there's some competition for sure there, and it's on in practice now because there's truly no guarantees with what we're going to do on really the wings there, especially.
Ready, and we'll close out with Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet. Go ahead, Sean.
Hey, Paul. Back to Kyle Connor. It's been no secret to you what a good player he is, having been able to coach him. It seems like he's starting to get more interest or play around the league. I know there were some pundits that had him winning scoring the most goals in the league this year. I know you don't like answering these questions to a degree because you don't like putting a cap on guys, but is Kyle Connor at the stage where his name should be mentioned above the best or along with the best scorers in the league?
I think he's going to get there. I do. And when that happens, I'm not sure. You know, when that breakthrough where everybody realizes that this guy's so very, very dangerous. If you were to come and watch the first 4 days of our training camp, you would say, well, it's coming soon, right? I mean, he's just, those guys score in practice too, right? And you can see it. We got 2 really, really high-end goalies out there, and he's putting pucks in the net. So it's coming. I really believe that this young man, and you'll get to know, he's got such a quiet personality about him, but he's driven to score goals. Wants to be a good player, incredibly fit. He's a pro. He reminds me a little bit, and I know they're friends. He's got a little bit of Connor Hellebuck in there, and that I'm sure he's got lots of other interests in his life, but hockey's his job and it's what he does. Like he's wired into being a great player. So he's going to get there.
Thanks very much, Paul. Thanks everybody for joining us. See you tomorrow.